Welcome to What Healthy Couples Know That You Don't, a podcast dedicated to helping you create the relationship you truly want.
Survive cheating. Transform pain into growth. Episode 145. Today we tackle one of the most painful and challenging experiences anyone can face in a relationship: infidelity. If you found yourself navigating the emotional turmoil that comes with betrayal, you're not alone. Infidelity shakes up the very foundation of trust and turns the world you thought you knew upside down. In this episode, we'll dive into the complexities of infidelity and how to start the process of recovery, whether you're the one betrayed or the one who broke the trust. Infidelity isn't just about the act of cheating. It's about the ripple effects that come afterward, the emotional wounds, the loss of trust, and the questions that seem impossible to answer can make both people feel lost. For those who've been betrayed, there's often an overwhelming sense of shock, followed by doubt about the future. For those who've been unfaithful, the feelings of guilt and shame can be equally debilitating. No matter which side you're on, healing is possible. But it takes effort, understanding, and a willingness to rebuild. One of the hardest aspects of recovering from infidelity is restoring trust. For some, trust might feel impossible to rebuild after such a deep wound. Yet for many couples, it can be repaired with time, effort, and transparent communication. In every interview episode, I cite research and a 2020 study by confront et al. Reported research across 160 cultures that revealed spousal infidelity is the most common reason for a breakup. A 2006 study by Edland et al. Found that men were more distressed by sexual infidelity, while women were more upset by emotional infidelity. In 2021, Selterman et al. Found that when people feel emotional shortfalls in their primary relationships, they may search for a deeper quality of romantic connection, which includes more intimacy in their affairs to compensate for the insufficient intimacy experienced with primary partners. Finally, a 2008 study, Safetsnal, has shown that the vast majority of therapists have never received any courses on infidelity, and that this had hampered their perceived competence when treating such individuals. As I've said so many times, relationships often derail in years 6 to 10. This is when the illusions die and the other person is often annoying. In the 1955, there was a Marilyn Monroe movie called The 7-Year Itch, which has continued to be a term for infidelity. So during this time period, there is often crisis when underlying problems emerge. This is also an opportunity to build a more authentic infrastructure with each other that will stand the test of time if you are both committed to growth. Because recovery isn't just about fixing the relationship. It's also about personal growth and healing. Perhaps there has been a lack of honesty to avoid hurting the other person, and then over time resentments have layered into a mountain of distance that obscures both truth and solutions. Now there is a very real opportunity to unbury all those layers into a trust that has been worked for and earned through hard conversations. Whether or not a couple decides to stay together, both individuals can use this time to heal emotionally and understand what they need to feel fulfilled and secure. We often begin relationships not knowing enough about who we are or what we need. When we are hungry, humans go sideways to get their needs met. Estimates vary that infidelity occurs in 20 or 25%, Rocock and Sean, 2023, of all marriages over a lifetime, 30 to 40% in unmarried relationships. Direct questioning in research leads to underreporting. To help us dive into what it takes to heal from infidelity and move forward, either as a couple or as an individuals, is an award-winning marriage counselor and researcher, Dr. Talal Al-Salim. He developed systematic affair recovery therapy, SART, and is recognized as the father of modern infidelity counseling. He is the author of the acclaimed books, plural, Infidelity, the Best Worst Thing That Could Happen to Your Marriage. I personally love that title. And Unfaithful and Unrepentant, Affairs Beyond the Hope of Repair. He is also the founder of the Infidelity Counseling Center. I discovered him in a recent New York Times article, and he agreed to be on the show. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much for having me.
Let's begin with you explaining the title to your book, Infidelity. Why is it the best worst thing that could happen to your marriage?
Great question. I always give the analogy that infidelity is like a heart attack to the relationship. So think of it this way. We all know that we're supposed to be eating healthy, exercising, and doing well. But most of us don't take the time to do so unless something really bad happened, like a heart attack. And in those situations, you see people eating better, exercising more than they ever done in their life, and they end up being in the best shape. And some people just continue doing what they're doing. So infidelity is kind of the same thing. I think a lot of people know that there are individual issues and relationship deficits that they need to take care of, but they don't take the time to address those issues. It could be, some of the myth that people have about relationships. They think that this is how it's supposed to be, or maybe they don't have access to resources, or sometimes they don't think those issues are pressing enough to worry about up until something like infidelity happened. Infidelity is a rude wake-up call that there's something seriously wrong going on in your life, whether in the individual level or the relationship level. And that in itself gives people a golden opportunity to actually look at those issues, lay all the cards on the table, and decide whether or not they want their relationship to survive. Which means that people are going to be motivated to do a lot of hard work that they skipped on way before the infidelity, because now there's something to lose. And that's how they end up with a better relationship than they ever had before. Now, we also have to understand that healing from infidelity doesn't always mean repairing the relationship. Healing from infidelity means healing from the trauma. I truly believe this is the case whether it's for couples counseling or infidelity recovery. The goal of this type of counseling is to help people get unstuck. For some, it could mean repairing the relationship, and for some, it could be ending a relationship that should have ended a long time ago.
I completely agree with you. I think what I say to people when they come in is this is an opportunity to build an honest infrastructure between the two of you. And, I'm hoping that you're both interested in committing to that, because it can definitely make things more solid and better than they ever were before. And then, of course, there's the people that are not going to commit to that work of change. And one of the things I say to people is, if somebody doesn't want to do the work to change and make things better, to me, it's almost a second betrayal. What do you think about that?
Absolutely, because for the betrayed to be willing to give the unfaithful an opportunity to rebuild the relationship after something as devastating as infidelity, it's a huge thing. To actually not take advantage of that opportunity, not do the work, it's adding insult to injury. So it can be equally as traumatizing as the act of infidelity, because now I gave you a chance and you pretty much squandered it.
Yes, I really like that. What are some of the factors that make some people more vulnerable and susceptible to infidelity? I thought that was a really interesting point that you talked about in your book.
So I think when we think about the causes of infidelity, first we have to zoom out and actually understand that there are three types of reason that causes infidelity. There are individual issues that has nothing to do with the relationship. There are relationship issues centered around relationship deficits, and there are environmental and theological factors that can amplify some of the pre-existing individual and relationship issues. And I think it's important for us to understand that, because if you ask the average person, average clinician, why does infidelity happen? Most people say, people cheat because they're not happy with their partner. Now, granted, relationship deficit is one of the leading causes of infidelity, but it's not the only one. We all have seen the relationship where we look at it and we don't understand. They seem to be having a perfect partner who's compatible and ready and willing to meet their needs, but despite their best effort, they're still dealing with infidelity, because sometimes it's not a relationship issue, it's an individual issue or an environmental issue. So if we try to answer the question of what causes people to be more vulnerable, I'll share some of the common relationship factors that I have seen that makes people vulnerable to infidelity. The first one is lacking relationship maturity. And what is relationship maturity? Relationship maturity is having the skill set to select, initiate, and maintain healthy relationship. And relationship maturity comes from two main sources. One of them is the family of origin models that we're exposed to. And unfortunately, many of us grew up without a healthy model. And another source of relationship maturity is the type of relationship that we engage in our adulthood prior to the current relationship that we have. So if you had a limited number of relationship experience, or relationship experience that were negative and toxic, that could also rob you from having relationship maturity. So that's a common relationship factors that can make people vulnerable for infidelity. Another one is poor communication and conflict resolution, and poor assessment of our own needs and finding partners who are compatible to meet those needs.
I really like that relationship maturity phrase. I think that that's a really, it helps you think about trying to be more grown up. And maybe I think that because I was 20 when I got married, and I know how much work there was to really be more grown up and mature and apologize and recognize the need for repair. And it really is, I like that a lot. I have not heard that before. I think it's important. You suggest getting the story is an important part of the process of dealing with infidelity. Could you share some of what this stage is about for my audience?
Sure. Getting the story of the affair is one of the most important milestones in the whole recovery process. I would say it's what make or break the process. And the clinical objective in this milestone is really to help the clients uncover the true narrative of the affair. Now, clinicians, unfortunately, are actually split on this. Some people think that every little detail matter, and some clinicians think that who cares about the story? Can we just focus from this point forward? I believe it's somewhere in between. I truly believe that in order for both partners, the unfaithful and the betrayed, decide where they're going to go after the discovery, they both need to understand the type of infidelity that happened and the reason why it happened, because it's going to help them identify which one is a better trajectory, a feeling that is more suited to their needs. Now, I believe telling the story doesn't mean that you have to share every little detail, because there is such thing as over-traumatizing the betrayed by exposing them to unnecessary details. To me, is really we need to ask the question that help us understand the type of infidelity that took place and the reason why it happened. Because that is really the purpose of the narrative, is the what and the why. And I've seen a lot of couples, unfortunately, get stuck in that cycle for many, many years because they didn't do this part properly, or the unfaithful squandered another opportunity to come clean and tell the truth. And what they did instead, they either gave partial truth or they continued to give the truth by a dropper, which is more traumatic and more devastating for everyone.
I remember reading a book about infidelity, one of the classics, and in it she recommended being able to share the kind of underwear the affair person had worn. And I would say to my clients when I recommended the book, because at the time that was what there was to work with, I've been doing this a long time, and I'd say, now she talks about the detail of the underwear, and I got to tell you, I think it's a bridge too far. I'm afraid somebody will obsess about it and it'll stick in their head and they won't be able to let go. So take that with a grain of salt and think about what's important about the story to share, and not every single detail that's available to obsess over. So I like what you say. I agree that it's the middle ground.
Well, and I'm glad you brought this up, because when I train therapists in the systematic affair recovery therapy model, and specifically in this milestone, I try to prepare them for what to expect in the therapy room. And this is kind of related to this debate about how much you should share and what details. When you are helping your clients discover the story of the affair, you're going to be seeing two type of forces. You see the force that trying to exaggerate what happened and make it worse than it was, and this is something done from the betrayed perspective, because that's just a classic response to trauma. You never know that this is going to happen, so you're going to prepare yourself for the worst, so you try to imagine the worst case scenario. On the opposite end, you're going to be seeing the unfaithful partner who is trying to minimize what happened. And the reason they're trying to minimize what happened is because, they don't want to deal with the guilt and shame, or maybe they don't want to change the trajectory of their partner's choice. So your job as a clinician is to balance between these forces, which means that you have to decide what is the appropriate level of disclosure. And in my work for many years, I couldn't find just a one fit approach for everyone. So the next best thing that I give to my trainees is really to assess, what is the reason, why is the reason the question is being asked? Because almost always when the betrayed is asking a question, there is a legitimate need that's driving this question. Sometimes the only way they know is by asking that type of question. So we'll give an example. Let's say you're having a couple who is dealing with a sexual infidelity, and the betrayed wants to know what kind of sexual activities or position that the unfaithful was engaged in. So if you ask, is this a good information to know or not, what would your answer be?
Mine, it would depend on the person. To me, do they tilt toward that obsessive energy, or is it something that really could help make the sex life more interesting and be a gain from the experience? So I think it depends on who the betrayed is.
Excellent. So this is part of it, right? It depends. So let's say, for example, that the infidelity, the sexual affair happened because of an incompatibility issue between the unfaithful and the betrayed, right? One person is identified as vanilla, the other person is on the other extreme of the kink community. In that scenario, it would be a fair question to ask, because I want to know what kind of compatibility that we are dealing with. Now, let's say that the infidelity happened because of individual issue related to the unfaithful dealing with sex addiction or pornography addiction. In that situation, it doesn't really matter. It's not an issue about compatibility, so why over-traumatize the betrayed by unnecessary detail? So even in the situation where you need to share some details, I always advise that we don't need technicolors. We don't need vivid imagery, because the betrayed is already dealing with that on their own. You don't need to add to it. So the way I go about it in my session, I always tell the unfaithful and the betrayed, I said, okay, I'm going to ask the unfaithful some questions to help me understand sequence of events, a state of mind, thoughts and feelings related to those actions. And as the betrayed, you're more than welcome to ask any question that you want to know. But before we give that answer, we have to make a case. How is the answer to this question is going to help you understand the type of infidelity that took place and the reason behind it. If you're able to make a case for it, then it's a good question to ask. If you're not able to make a case for it, then you probably don't want that detail. There is something else that you need, but you don't know how to get to that without asking that question.
I like the depth. I always think that part of what the podcast is about is helping people understand making distinctions, that it isn't either or, 1 or 10, black or white. It's gray. It's the middle ground. It's 4, 5, 6, 7. It's in between. And that's what therapy is about. And you're doing such a great job of making those distinctions. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Another important milestone in recovery is acknowledging the impact. Tell us more about what that's about.
So acknowledging the impact, the clinical objective in that milestone is to really assess and showcase whether the unfaithful partner is able to understand the scope of the damage that they have caused by their infidelity. Not just on the intellectual level, it's also whether or not they have the appropriate feelings that one expects them to have as it pertains to that understanding. Why is this important? Because from the betrayed perspective, if they're trying to consider to rebuild the relationship, they don't want to rebuild with somebody who minimizes the consequences of their actions. They want to build with somebody who truly understands the damage that they have caused, because we believe that if they understand that damage, maybe they will be more willing to address the issues that led them to be unfaithful in the first place. But sometimes you might have an unfaithful partner who can understand the damage on the intellectual level. They can describe it to you, but they don't have any of the feelings that one to expect. They're not feeling guilty. They're not feeling regretful. They're not feeling ashamed. And this was actually one of the main reasons I wrote my second book, Unfaithful and Repentant, Affair Beyond the Hope of Repair, to describe the archetypes of unfaithful partners who makes it difficult for folks to heal by repairing the relationship. So it's important for the unfaithful not only to list the damage on the intellectual level, but also are they going to have the appropriate feelings? Because if you build with somebody who gets the damage and not have those feelings, and you're building with somebody who's a sociopath, and that would set up the stage for a future relapse.
It's kind of like a judge looking for remorse in the person who, before he sentences them, wanting to have some sense of authentic remorse, as opposed to somebody who's not paying attention to that at all.
Yeah, I was going to say that's bringing up another area of gray of distinction. So sometimes a mistake on the betrayed end is that they have a very specific vision of how this remorse or how this emotional impact manifests, and oftentimes they are measuring it from their perspectives. They feel like, well, if I was the one who cheated, you will be seeing me doing A and B and C and D. And my rebuttal on that one, well, the two of you are two different people. The two of you have two different vantage points. It's unrealistic to expect that the vision of emotional intensity that you're expecting will match yours. Now, that doesn't mean the unfaithful is off the hook and shouldn't have any of those feelings I want to expect, is that we have to take it in consideration. For example, let's say that the unfaithful was a person who historically struggled with emotional expression prior to the infidelity. Being unfaithful or discovering their affair is not going to magically make them better at emotional expression. They're still going to be dealing with that deficit. Another thing to consider is that there is a delay in terms of the time between the unfaithful and the betrayed, meaning that the unfaithful were the first one who knew when they crossed lines of fidelity, so they took their time to process whatever feelings of guilt and shame and remorse that they had. Right? By the time the affair is discovered, they're not going to have that same intensity, because from the betrayed perspective, this is brand new to you, right? The unfaithful had plenty of opportunity to process their feelings, and oftentimes maybe that they were at peace with those feelings. So that's something we need to consider as well.
Yes, absolutely. So if the unfaithful person is unrepentant, what signs are there that tell us remorse is not really happening and the relationship might be beyond the ability to repair?
Perfect. So the first thing I need to say is that a lot of times when people hear repentance, they think spiritual and religious connotation, and I chose that term specifically because it is really the best term that describes what people are needing at that time. But we have to understand is the betrayed need for repentance is not coming from a spiritual place, even though this is a term that's steeped in theology. Repentance is really a secular clinical construct that all clients need, regardless of their spiritual orientation and their worldview. Everybody is expecting that the unfaithful partner is having the capacity to introspect and reflect on their actions and the consequences that they have caused by their infidelity. So if we're trying to look at and repentance and how does that impede the therapeutic efforts to repair the relationship, I will draw a parallel between one of the three important milestones of recovery and the three main aspects of repentance to see if we can clarify this. So the three milestones that are crucial out of the seven, all of them are important, but the three ones we're going to highlight are getting the story, acknowledging the impact, and creating a plan of action. And the creating plan of action milestone is the opportunity to address the factors that led to infidelity and the steps you're going to take to fix it. Put that on the back burner. When we take a look at repentance, there are three components of repentance. There is confession, there is contrition, and there is commitment to change. If we put them side by side with the three milestones of recovery, you're going to see a clear parallel. So the confession is the ability to tell the story and being able to do that successfully. The contrition is acknowledging the impact and whether or not the unfaithful partner is able to demonstrate the expected feelings that one to expect. And the commitment to change, this is the action plan. Are they going to do the work to address the reason that led to the infidelity in the first place? So how does manifestation and repentance take place? So when we're looking at the milestones of getting the story, you'll see the unfaithful either minimize, whitewash, deny what happened. They're trying to really skew the narrative so that it becomes muddy. Or sometimes they might go the other extreme. They give you every little detail, but in that situation, they're doing it to hurt the betrayed. So there's a specific archetype of unfaithful and unrepentant. This is the despaired. These are the folks who cheated because of a significant relationship deficit. So from their vantage point, I had excuses to cheat. It's your fault I cheated, right? Because I tried to bring this issue to your attention and you didn't do anything about it. So if you're going to ask me why this happened, I'm going to give you all the excruciating details. I'm going to tell you how this person is much better than you are than meeting my needs. That's problematic. How could you rebuild with somebody who's blaming you for their mistake, right? Because there's difference between taking accountability for the relationship deficit on both parts versus blaming the betrayed for the acts of infidelity. They're two separate things. If we take a look at the signs to look for and acknowledging the impact, we'll go with the same archetype, the archetype of the despaired. Oftentimes those folks are not feeling guilty, not feeling remorse. Actually, they're feeling indignant because now, it's your fault that I cheated, right? I didn't want to cheat. You forced my arm to do this, which means you're not going to be getting the remorse that you're looking for. When we take a look at creating an action plan, so even when we identify the relationship deficit that led to the infidelity, let's say maybe one of them was not enough intimacy, and we identified the barriers for sexual intimacy. Now that we have an action plan to repair that, you will see the unfaithful blocking those opportunities or making excuses because fundamentally from their vantage point, they don't believe that the betrayed is ever going to be willing to fulfill their needs. So if you look at it from these three angles, they are not really giving the therapist and the betrayed the tools and the space to actually help repair the relationship.
Yes, that's a very clear picture. It really is. Why do couples get stuck in the twilight zone of not parting or moving forward?
I think this has to do with how we're socialized about our view about infidelity. And you can test this by asking people generally, or you just can look at the literature and research of how people conceptualize infidelity. So when you ask people, what would you do if your partner cheated on you? Most people would say, I would leave. But the reality is when infidelity happened and it is actually discovered, you don't see the same number of people who say that I would leave to actually start working on the relationship. Why is this the case? Well, when you're asking somebody in a hypothetical scenario, you're imagining what you're going to feel. And you're imagining, the pain, the betrayal, the anger, the disrespect. Which is all true. These are the same feelings that will happen when the hypothetical actually take place. But what you don't conjure up in the hypothetical is the fact that in addition to those unpleasant feelings, there is feelings of love, there is feelings of care, there is feelings about, maybe the positive history in the relationship prior to the infidelity. There's the fear about the future and the family unit. So when infidelity happened, people actually seriously consider whether or not they should stay or they should leave. So it's not an easy decision to make. So that's part of it. But more importantly, the path of recovery, whether it's by rebuilding the relationship or healing individually, Both of them are difficult paths, and sometimes when people feel that they don't like their choices, they feel helpless. And my job is to say, you might not like your option, but it does not mean you don't have options. And in those situations, you have to choose the lesser of two evil. Because if you don't choose and you're standing at this fork of the road, life has a funny way of forcing a choice on you. And I'd rather that you are taking charge of your choice so that you can deal with the rewards of the consequences versus letting life choose for you for the wrong reasons.
There is a process of doubting and questioning by the betrayed when they are obsessing that can go on for a very long time because their world was destroyed. What is your advice about navigating this difficult time that many, many couples experience?
Sure. For starters, is making sure that when somebody discovers infidelity, they need to accept that this is something that you cannot fix on your own. I even say that in my books, like they're self-help books, but you'd be foolish to think a book is going to fix your issues. It's designed to give you information so you can be selective about which path to go through. But also, in order for people to not be stuck and obsess over those details, you have to help them get that narrative, right? Because if we get their narrative, if we are able to understand the type of infidelity that happened and the reason why it happened, it's easier for us not to ask those questions over and over and over again, assuming that part was done properly. So the deal that I make with my clients when we're working on getting the story of the affair, I say this is the most important milestone. I don't care how much time we spend on it. We spend on it as much time until it's done to everybody's satisfaction. And we will all agree, here's the what and here's the why. We have to make a conscious effort that we're not going to revisit the story, period. That doesn't mean that we don't talk about the trauma. That doesn't mean we don't process our feeling. That means that we're making a conscious choice to not ask any more questions about the narrative, because in this situation, why ask questions that you already know the answer for? More importantly, we have to make a decision that we are going to destroy and get rid of whatever evidence we discovered, because that's another way for people to ruminate and fixate on all of these things. And we have to treat that as a really important commitment. And also the deal would be is that if the betrayed is continuing to ask questions about the narrative, the unfaithful have to remind them of that agreement that we made. And a version of this would be, I would be more than happy to tell you everything that you want, but we agreed with Dr. Talal, we're not going to revisit that. If there is a reason why we want to revisit the story, we can duke it out in my presence so that we can see, is there a legitimate reason for that or not? But oftentimes, when people are asking questions about the story, even though the narrative was discovered, is because they're really having a triggers and they need reassurance and then accountability. But sometimes the best way for them to do this is by asking those questions. And, a version of that would be like, tell me again why you did this. Tell me again, how come you didn't think about me and the kids when you did this? Well, that's not really a question. That's really more of a way trying to facilitate emotional expression.
I really like the part about having reassurance. I think that's exactly right, that many times it's simply, those questions are simply feeling haunted or triggered, as you mentioned, and wanting that reassurance. And it really it's important. Reassurance in a betrayal is a big, important factor. In your book, you cite the 2014 statistic that 31% of marriages last after an affair has been admitted to or discovered. What are the factors that allow people to recover from infidelity?
Sure. And these are just kind of general statistics for folks, regardless of which models that they use. I would say the folks who are using the systematic affair recovery therapy model, the folks who actually end up deciding to repair their relationship for the right reason, in the 80% range. So there are 3 areas of assessment that I encourage my clients to go through when we're deciding, should we rebuild the relationship, should we heal by rebuilding the relationship, or should we heal individually? The first area of assessment is the type of relationship people may had prior to the infidelity. And there is 3 categories of people. There is the one who had it and lost it. There's the one who never had it in the first place. And there is somewhere in between. all of these guys can be good candidates for rebuilding the relationship, just different levels of successes and failure. The one who has the highest chance for rebuilding the relationship successfully are the folks who had it and lost it. These are the couple who can recall, these are the couple who started the relationship for the right reason. They chose a compatible partner. They can recall a big segment of the relationship where it was healthy and meeting everybody's needs. But life happens, and they didn't address the individual and relationship issues that might have contributed to infidelity. Those guys tend to be more successful because there is muscle memory, there is something worth saving, so it's easier for them to do the work needed to prevent relapse. The one who is least successful are the one who never had in the first place. These are the folks who the relationship was bad from day one. Maybe they started a relationship for the wrong reason. Somebody got pregnant or somebody got pressured into being in a relationship. And infidelity is just one more bad thing on the awful cake. So it's going to be difficult for them to rebuild successfully because there is no incentive to do the hard work, and there is nothing really worth saving. So what they have to do is, for the first time ever, that they will say, hey, this is who I am, this is who you are, should we really be in a relationship? And the hybrid is somewhere in between. These are the folks who, there was a healthy aspect of the relationship, but the infidelity maybe was so pervasive or started early on in the relationship. So they tend to be somewhere in between in terms of prognosis. Secondary assessment that help decide who would be a better predictor for rebuilding the relationship is how do people do in the milestones of recovery? How do they do in telling the story? How do they do in acknowledging the impact? Because if you have somebody who is not able to be honest, right, somebody who is failing in giving you the story, you can't rebuild a relationship with an agreed upon narrative. Or if you have a story and you have somebody who is lacking the empathy or not being able to own up to the damage that they have caused, it's going to be a struggle to be successful, because why would you rebuild with somebody who doesn't have the emotional bandwidth to understand the consequences of their action? Last area of assessment that couples have to go through is the type of infidelity that took place and the reason why it happened. And there is no right or wrong answer for that one. It's just going to be different couple to couple. But the best way to wrap our mind around it, think of it this way, is whether or not the infidelity was caused by primarily individual issues or relationship issues might be a deal breaker for some, and others whether or not to build a relationship. For example, some people might be more than willing to rebuild their relationship if it was clearly happening because of a relationship deficit and the rationale behind it from the betrayed perspective. Well, we both have control over this. If I do my part and you do your part, we don't have to worry about this again. For others, it might be a deal breaker. For other betrayed partners might say, well, no, I'm happy with who I am. The relationship deficit might be caused by incompatibility. So why would I want to rebuild a relationship with somebody who doesn't like me as an individual? And you make the same argument too about individual issues. Let's say betrayed partners might be willing to work with somebody who the cause of infidelity was an individual issue like sex addiction. They say, it's not personal, it's not me. If we get you the help you need, maybe this won't happen again. Others might say, well, that's nice, it's a sex addiction, but I have no control over how serious you're going to take your recovery effort. So why would I sign up with somebody that I don't really know are they going to do the work or not? So it's going to be different person to person. And that's in itself highlight the significance of the narrative as a tool to help people decide where to go.
Yes. Very, very wonderful. You mentioned that sometimes the betrayed can have a double standard. Can you explain why this can get in the way of healing?
Yeah, the clearest example that I can use is after the discovery of infidelity, both the unfaithful and the betrayed, for the most part, are going to be dealing with a lot of intense emotions. But the betrayed oftentimes feel that they're going to have the monopoly on pain because they're the victim, they're the one who's been hurt, they're the one who didn't cheat, right? Oftentimes they hear the betrayed say, well, I'm in the same dysfunctional relationship as you are, how come I didn't cheat and you cheated, right? So therefore my pain trumps your pain. And that can be problematic, especially if you are dealing with infidelities where it was an emotional affair, and let's say that there was an emotional attachment between the unfaithful and the third party, which is the term that I use to describe the affair partner. So in those situations, the logical and healthy thing to observe is to actually to see the unfaithful go through the process of loss, because even though they decided to be in the relationship with their partner, they're still going to be grieving something that was fulfilling a need for them. But from the betrayed perspective, they might not have the bandwidth for that. They might say, like, no, you're not allowed to have any feelings whatsoever. Now we're worried about my feelings, right? Or as the unfaithful, you're not allowed to be frustrated about garden variety things that has nothing to do with infidelity, because my pain more important. It somehow, think of it like, skew the dynamic of the relationship to the point where a person have all the rights and the person have zero rights. And that's problematic, because despite the awfulness of the infidelity act, that does not mean that the unfaithful ceases to be a human being. They're still going to have, normal human emotion. They have the right to be upset. They have the right to be disappointed. What they don't have the right is for that to take the spotlight from everything. But we cannot say they have zero rights to be upset or hurt, because they still deal with that as well.
That messy middle ground where too much self-righteousness can destroy the possibility of healing is another way to think about it,
Yeah, and I always tell folks it's a delicate balance to achieve, because therapeutically, I don't think you should be shielding the unfaithful from the natural consequences of their behavior. I'm okay with allowing the unfaithful to connect with that. That's what needs to happen. Mm-hmm. But there's a difference between the natural consequences versus going out of your way to rub their nose in it, right? Because at that point of time, it becomes punishment versus something else. And I always tell this debate is, when I preach against punishment is bad, it's not because I'm worried. It's not for the unfaithful's sake. It's for the betrayed sake. Because if you want the unfaithful to make the right decision and make the changes, you don't want them to be coming out of punishment. And also, if punishment works, we would not have prisons, right? Like, that's like, there are people who experience the natural consequences of the behavior or not. That, like, pain itself does not shape behavior, right? You could actually do the opposite by trying to force compliance simply out of punishment.
I talk about penance, that sometimes people demand penance, and that's not, it doesn't create enough space to meet in that messy middle ground to try to solve things together. And so, and I haven't read a lot about that double standard, which is why I think your book really covers so much detail in so many areas for the unfaithful and the betrayed. And very respectful of both in terms of what needs to happen to make change.
Sure. And I would say, when we talk about the idea of penance, what I introduce is really the idea of redemption, right? Because for me, really, redemption is something that the unfaithful should want for themselves, regardless of whether they're going to stay in this relationship or not. And redemption is really facing the factors that led to the infidelity and just transcending that and being better for yourself, regardless of whether or not it's going to allow you to be in this relationship. I think that's a healthier way of looking at this, and it's easier to assess the motivation versus, because penance is like you're forced to do it. Redemption, it's something that you want for yourself.
Yes. Transformation. We're all into that. What is reasonable and what is unreasonable about monitoring for couples in their path of recovery? I get this question a lot from people.
Well, for that one, I hope you allow me to get on my soapbox for a little bit about transparency, and I'll address that part. So, I really believe in a healthy relationship, and this is with or without infidelity. There is no such thing as, privacy or for my eyes only. And people don't like hearing that, but I'm not here to make friends. I'm here to say what works and what doesn't. I think sometimes people want to conflate autonomy with transparency. I think, again, if you're in a healthy relationship and you're feeling compelled that there is a part of your life, an aspect that you have to hide from your partner, that's problematic, because it's either that you're doing something that you're not supposed to do, and that's why you don't want to give access, or that you don't trust your partner enough with letting them see that side of you. either way, it's a problem that's it's waiting to happen. So I really think in a healthy relationship, the sense of, this is for my eyes only, that's problematic. I always give the analogy, that, you live in a big house, there's all these rooms, they all have doors and they have locks on them. I'm okay with the doors being closed. If you want to see what's behind this door, you can ask me, hey, Talal, can you show me what's behind that? And I'll open that door for you. I think that's a healthy way of, respecting privacy and allowing transparency. Now, when we talk about post-discovery of infidelity, transparency is crucial and essential because trust is out the window, right? So how do I know this won't happen again? But also what I tell my clients is that transparency post the discovery of infidelity, it's a mean to an end. It's not going to fix your problem. It's not going to rebuild trust. It's the crutch that you need while you are seeing your partner work on the factors that led to the infidelity in the first place. So it's a mean to an end because anybody can look good on paper or in the digital world. I mean, nowadays we have, unfortunately, the technology for people to cover their track. So transparency by itself, it doesn't mean that's an anchor for trust. It's a mean to an end to minimize the unnecessary anxiety while you're seeing your partner and yourself working on those issues that led to the infidelity.
What are some tools couples can use to prevent relapse?
Well, after the discovery of infidelity, like I said, people not only need to be considering couples counseling, they need to be considering specialized infidelity recovery counseling. And they also need to be undergoing individual therapy to help them deal with the impact of the trauma. And also, especially for the couples who made the mistakes of entangling their kids with the discovery about infidelity, sometimes they need to engage in family therapy because exposure to parental infidelity can lead to short-term and long-term impact on the kids. And when I say kids, I'm not just talking about children. I think even adults can be impacted by this. So it's really important for folks to get the appropriate care. One thing I always recommend for couples when we get to the point of creating an action plan and addressing the issues that led to this is to have a weekly business meeting for the relationship. I really believe healthy relationships should operate like a healthy enterprises. And in any kind of successful business, part of what they do is they have a meeting. And the purpose of the meeting is to make sure that we're highlighting what's working, what's good. Thank you for this. Please do more of that, as well as addressing the things that we need to fix. Because if couples take the time to do this on their own, this is your own therapy session without a therapist, you're going to get ahead a lot of issues. You're going to know where you stand. Are you meeting your partner's needs? Is your partner meeting your needs? And also allow you the opportunity to address those issues in peacetime versus wartime. I always tell folks, if you try to resolve a complex issue the moment somebody pushed a button for you, you're not going to be successful in communicating your point of view successfully. And also, your message may not land very well on the ears of your partner if you're doing it out of anger and it's intense. But if you actually know you have an outlet, a weekly outlet at a minimum, right? You don't have to bring it up in that moment of time. You can actually take your time, figure out what is the issue, how do you want to describe it, what is the expected outcome so that you can actually have a healthy resolution. And what needs to happen once we bring up those issues and come up with solutions, we implement that solution. And the next time we meet to say, hey, did this work? Did this resolve the issue? So that we don't have to worry about negative equity in the relationship.
Any last tidbits of wisdom you want to share with my audience that we haven't covered?
So I'll share one for the clients and one for the therapist. So for the clients, again, just emphasizing that, when you discover the infidelity, please don't think that the only option is repairing the relationship. The purpose of seeking counseling is to process the trauma and choose a trajectory of healing. It could mean repairing the relationship or it could mean healing individually. And also, just because you're agreeing to counseling, it does not mean you have made a decision. You're just agreeing to the process that will help you see clarity so that you don't have regrets down the road. So treat it as a serious matter. Take it as an opportunity for you to actually be a catalyst for change. For clinicians, this is whether, for the younger clinicians and the seasoned clinicians, infidelity recovery is something that you can't afford not to be skilled in. I had to, they say need is another invention. The reason I invented the systematic affair recovery therapy, because in my wide clinical experiences and all these tools that I learned when I was an intern and a younger clinician, none of them were tailor-made for infidelity. And sometimes people think, why do I need to learn about infidelity recovery? I don't work with couples. Oh, I work with couples, but none of them work with infidelity. Well, if you work with couples, I guarantee you at least 50% of them or more, you're going to be running into that. You just don't know it yet. And sometimes the current issue that people have is because of past infidelity they didn't take care of, and they're still stuck in the past. But if you don't work with couples, infidelity can impact kids. It can impact individuals. It can impact them from their family of origin. So you still need to learn about it. And for those folks, I encourage them to take advantage of the level 1 systematic affair recovery therapy training. It's online. You have the options for Q&A. You can do it at your own pace. You get certified and you get 17 CE units as well.
So there was a cover story a few years ago on Psychotherapy Networker, which was the dirty little secret of psychotherapy. Most people are bad at couples. And when I did my training in Gestalt, I went to Cape Cod specifically to learn couples and family therapy back in the day when family therapy was much more of a thing. And I really learned so much, and it was such a valuable thing. And one of the reasons I started this podcast is that I don't think people know enough about couples therapy and relationships. So I think I really agree with you. Please tell my audience the names of your 2 books and your website.
First book is Infidelity, the best worst thing that could happen to your marriage. And for that book, what you expect is the past 7 milestones of recovery to help your clients, as well as folks who are dealing with infidelity, to understand what is the process of healing. Second book is Unfaithful and Unrepentant, Affairs Beyond the Hope of Repair. And this one describes the 9 archetypes of unfaithful partners that makes the repairing efforts almost impossible endeavor. Both of these books are available on Amazon, Kindle, and Audible. And folks can find my work and information about systematic affair recovery therapy on my website, talalalsalim.com.
And if you like to look at 450 pages of free information with no ads, my website is therapyideas.net. My children's book, Dancing with Your Lizard Brain, can be found for sale on Amazon.
Thank you for listening to What Healthy Couples Know That You Don't. If you have enjoyed the show, please leave a rating and review on iTunes and help get the word out. To learn more or connect with Rhoda, visit therapyideas.net.